Hello, everyone. Whether or not you celebrated a holiday, are currently celebrating a holiday, or will be celebrating a holiday, or don't celebrate holidays, I just want to say I hope you're doing well. I hope you're having fun, and I hope you enjoy what should be a very fun edition of Locked On Guardians.
Tanner Bagby of the Guardians, and you're listening to Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. For those who do not know me, if this is your first episode, thank you for joining me. If you're someone like John, I got to pull up every week. I'm going to start pulling up the list and looking at who are the people who are top iTunes commenters. John, I know you're at the top of it, but I want to thank everyone for coming back. But for those who do not know me, I'm Jeff Ellis, the host of Locked On Guardians. I've been here since the inception of this podcast as we approach 2,000 episodes. Before that, I was nationally recognized as a draft and prospect analyst at Scout and 24/7. On today's show, we're going to get a little bit more into Carlos Santana. But we're also going to talk about the first base market because we've seen a lot of movement. I think we have to talk about this market as a whole. Get into some other trades that were made involving first baseman. Talk about that. We're going to talk about this JUCO rule. Talk about the effect I think it's going to have on Major League Baseball, or the effect it won't have, or the effect it's going to have on college baseball. Then we're just going to get into some other MLB news and rumors and stuff that maybe tangential. And see, this is why I don't always say names. Okay, you know what I mean. A tangent from the Guardians, but still are worth mentioning, things that are kind of interesting or things we've talked about on the show today. So let's talk a little bit about the first base market in general. It has been fast and furious. It has been one of those things where it feels like there's no one left. If you are the last one standing, if you did not get a chair, you're out. This is like those good old days of, when the music stops, if you don't have a chair, you're out of luck. And man, I'm old and forgotten the name of that simple child's game that probably has a name just like what it is called. But you can comment in the space below. Oh, I'm a middle school teacher, not an elementary school teacher. But yeah, like we've seen so much movement. I think it's really interesting too to look at what the Guardians did, getting Slade Ciccone as well as that comp pick, because the next day, the Texas Rangers traded Nathan Lowe, or is it Lowe? Could be, sometimes names are pronounced weird. I don't know why I decided to go with the non-normal name. I know it's Lowe. I know it's not Lowe. But watch me be wrong about that now. But either way, they traded him with 2 years of team control, and they got back Robert Garcia. Now, this is really interesting for a couple reasons. One, Garcia, he shows the difference between F-WAR and B-WAR. For those who don't know, B-WAR is baseball reference. F is Fangraphs. B-WAR gave him a negative WAR value. Fangraphs gave him a positive. I don't really use baseball reference in terms of pitcher, specifically reliever WAR, especially if you go to Garcia's Savant page. It's really good. It's reds all over. He doesn't have the best velocity, and it's because he can just throw a changeup. He threw it 31% of the time, and it's a money pitch. As a lefty, he can throw that pitch to lefties or righties. Changeups are platoon neutral, and he had some of the best barrel and hard hit percentages in terms of avoiding barreling and avoiding hard hit. So he's a solid reliever with 5 more years of team control. But is he a closer? I don't think so, because his four seam, which he throws 50% of the time, actually got hit pretty hard, and his slider doesn't do a whole lot. Like, he is changeup, and he was great with that changeup. But you're looking at a guy who, in Cleveland's bullpen, would be their 4th best reliever, and I firmly believe that. And it's not, he's a very good reliever, and yeah, his FIP is fantastic, but I don't even know if he'd be Cleveland's number 1 lefty based on what we saw a year ago. And I know there's people who disagree with me, and that's fine. But that got Nathan Lowe, who's a lot like Santana, but younger. Not as much power as Santana, let's be honest. But an on-base defense type of guy who is going to make about $10.7 million. Who Cleveland, Slade Ciccone is not proven yet, but I feel like they got more for 1 year of Naylor with Ciccone and that comp pick than the Rangers the next day got for Lowe, who I'm not sure if he's been an all-star, but I know he's won a Gold Glove. Like that's a player who has taken home some hardware. And it's just interesting to compare those deals because they happen so close to each other. And then we talked about Goldschmidt signing. For instance, Seattle Mariners. We know right now they are a team left holding the bag. Why do we know this? Because Ken Rosenthal reported that Santana basically had a deal done with Seattle. Like, he was very close to the finish line. He sold his house in Cleveland the day before he signed his contract. He's apparently good friends with Julio Rodriguez. I put that to the side. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on, but good friends with Julio Rodriguez since a short time there. We know that this is a guy who just makes friends everywhere. And they were going to offer him a 2-year deal. Second year would have been a player option. He was offered more money, I read in reports, to go to Seattle, but he likes it here. He likes all the people here in Cleveland. So he took less money. He came back here, signed the 1-year deal. And we also have to talk about money, because it's really weird in the comments, like the number of people who want to make the Naylor trade and the Santana signing about money. Depending on where you look at things, Naylor was going to make between 12 to 14 million. Most people thought probably closer to 12. I trust trade rumors more than Spotrac. Spotrac was at 14, trade rumors at 12. Santana has a very easy incentive. I saw Tom Withers report that he is going to get 1.2 million bonuses for plate appearances. You don't give him his contract to not play every day. So Santana's going to get to those incentives. So he signed for 13.2. Naylor was going to make 12.5. So they're paying Santana more money than they're going to pay Naylor. And then apparently the way this trade came was when Walker signed, Houston would sign with Houston. Then all of a sudden the Astros are like looking at what's left and called Cleveland. They probably had some talks about this trade already, put the final touches on, maybe agreed what Cleveland wanted in this case, because they felt like they didn't have a lot of great. And I mean, the Astros keep messing these teams up. The Diamondbacks then turned around. I mean, they also lost Jock Peterson to the Texas Rangers. The Rangers are smart. They went and traded for Jake Berger. If you want to talk about power, like, I like Jake Berger. He is a flawed player, but he's going to hit a lot of home runs. They gave up almost nothing for him. And when you look at, what they paid, what they got back for Lowe was more than they paid for Berger. You look at what the cost to get Naylor was significant. I mean, they traded like their 12th best prospect and 2 other dudes to get Jake Berger. Is Berger a great defender? No, but I mean, he's one of the guys who hits the ball the hardest in all of baseball. If you just want pure power, and he's got a lot of control. I mean, they traded Jake Etter for him, a year and a half ago? That's a much bigger cost than what they. Sorry, this cord just bothered me. It's showing up here, but they kudos to Texas. They made a smart deal ahead of things. I guess I'm gonna have to just deal with that cord there. But they went out and made that move, which then allowed them to. They needed bullpen help, and now that Texas has turned around and signed Peterson, I still wonder if Josh Smith is available. I still think in a super utility role, playing some second, playing some outfield, would be perfect on this team, especially if they still want more relief help. I still would love to call them about that. This is interesting because Arizona's DH is now Pavin Smith, who was a very high pick. It's another one of those Virginia failures. Sorry, Aaron. Who's like, if Pavin Smith was a everyday player, he would already be an everyday player. Like, he's not a good enough hitter to do that. They've tried him in left field, DH, first base. If he was good enough to demand a spot in the lineup, he'd be in their lineup. So Arizona's in a really weird place, having lost Peterson and Walker. And Naylor helps them, but they are certainly not as strong as they were a year ago. And here's the thing, Naylor could have a fantastic year. He's moving to, I think, the second friendliest hitter park in baseball behind Coors Field. So he might have a fantastic year, but I do want to put that caveat on it. It's a little bit of a different situation for him where he's going stadium-wise. But Arizona paid, now it's kind of going back and you look at what everyone else paid. They paid a significant amount comparative to what first basemen are netting. And is it maybe the high values people expected? No, but compared to what other first basemen went for, it's a pretty good value that Cleveland pulled out in the end. It's more than Berger, it's more than Lowe got, and both those guys had multiple years of team control. So Seattle now did not get a first baseman. Goldschmidt going to the Yankees, who had a good second half. Maybe I was too harsh on him. And Santana's, escalators give him the chance, and they're being plate appearance based. Basically, he just has to stay healthy to get it. It's going to be relatively easy for him to attain. So they are paying Santana more than they would have paid Naylor. So we can't, like I said, there's points and times where we can bring up, the lack of spending here. This isn't the one, because it's looking like this is going to be a situation where they're going to pay more for Santana, which I know. Justin and I had a huge debate, and maybe we'll get be like, hey, keep that off air. But we had a huge debate about this trade. And I still think it's about, yeah, it's about the future. And I know Antonetti said it's about the future, but I feel like AI Antonetti would say the same thing because he says that with everything. Like it was very canned responses from him. And I think you don't go out and pay Santana more money. I mean, they had to because that's what and for everyone to be like, oh, I wish they hadn't paid it. That's what the market was. He took less to come here versus what he was going to get in Seattle in a 2-year total package deal. Because it wasn't a team option, it was a player option contract he was getting. So that's what the market said he was, and Cleveland decided to pay him more than Naylor was projected to get. And here's the last point on the Naylor Santana bit, and we're probably going to run to break after this and then come back, talk about this a little bit more, then get into the ruling. But I think it is very important when you are looking at Josh Naylor. So many of our comments have been about conditioning. When we were on the press conference, someone asked about conditioning and they declined to talk about it. That is a very sensitive topic. Whenever I bring it up, someone insults me in the comments below. So I will. And if you're the person who does it, congratulations on being hidden from chat because, I mean, it's my podcast. But conditioning is an issue. We all know that. Cleveland doesn't want to go to arbitration with Josh Naylor and have to bring that up. We've talked about how bad it is with the Brewers with several players, like the Corbin Burns situation 2 years ago, and how arbitration often goes poorly and it builds this negative energy. And Cleveland might have also been looking to get out in front of trading Josh Naylor because arbitration is where you sit down and talk about all the reasons why you don't think that player should get paid what they want to get paid. Because you go in front of an arbiter, and remember, like you can go back to when Trevor Bauer was here and he talked about like he had a very negative visceral reaction. I mean, the guy seems to have negative visceral reactions to most things, but that is how these go. It is always the team has to talk about your negatives and your warts. They don't go in to praise you because it's two sides arguing to try to find a middle ground for money. They are going to take the most negative point of view. That's why arbitration is really bad. You want to avoid getting into it with players because it just builds acrimony. It builds negative feelings. If they had to go into arbitration with Josh Naylor, they would have had to talk about his injuries. They would have had to talk about his health and trading him on top of, getting the parts they got and then immediately getting one of the last first basemen on the market. And this whole chain of events also hurt Seattle, who could be a team that is competing with them for a Cleveland doesn't win the division, competing with them for a wild card. Like they managed to hurt the Twins with this and hurt the Seattle Mariners with this. Two teams who they are competing directly against. They helped shift the market, so there's almost nothing left. And they moved Naylor to the NL. Other people, there are not a great number of places for the Twins or Seattle to rotate to. It's a pretty weak first base market now. And Cleveland also avoided a potentially very negative situation, and they don't have to worry about that anymore. There's more to talk about. I know I just spent 13 minutes. We're going to come back and talk about even more about the Carlos Santana situation. Someone had a great comment I got to respond to in our comments, as well as just kind of talking about this whole JUCO ruling, which ESPN wrote a big article on, and I've got thoughts on as well. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. You can win which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but they also have bets for, so many things. You can look at scores, who scores, all of that stuff. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So we've got a few last little points here on the Carlos Santana of it all. Everyday Esri Dax brought up a very good point, which is I know, again, the money is one of those things people focus on. The talk is about, this is an ALCS team. They should be adding, not subtracting, or making lateral moves. Of the teams who have TV money in not insustainability, but don't have stability in terms of what the TV money is they're going to make. The Guardians, the Twins, the Padres, that whole group of teams that did not re-sign with Bally's at 80%, who are with MLB. Of those teams, Cleveland is a top spender in free agency. I'm going to repeat that again. Of the teams with instability, the teams that were let go, and I'm just going to pause the show here so I can pull up the full list. So that group of teams are the Milwaukee Brewers, the Minnesota Twins, the Cleveland Guardians, the Texas Rangers, and the San Diego Padres. San Diego hasn't done anything yet. There's talk that they're going to cut even more salary. The Twins, can't think of them doing anything. Am I wrong? Involving them outside of maybe trying to, move some players and reduce salary. Milwaukee is not. I'm here in the area. I thought it was interesting when they decided not to keep Colin Ray, and I thought a relatively cheap cost for a fifth or for a number 5 starter. But then again, no one claimed him, so I clearly don't know anything. And Texas has made some trades, but they have not gone out and spent. Now you could also say all those teams for the most part, outspend Cleveland normally. But it is interesting that I think Cleveland has signed the only, they've committed essentially $30 million to, or I guess that's not fair. Let's be honest, $27 million. Let's just give it the full amount. I don't think anyone has committed over 10 of the rest of that group. So amongst teams with instability, they have spent. And I think that is something that needs to be pointed out and brought up because they are in a very weird situation. There are 5 teams right now who have it much worse than the rest of the league. And again, I know people don't want to hear it, but Minnesota is a bigger market. Milwaukee is a similar market. Texas is a much bigger market, but Texas, I think, decided they didn't want anything to do with Diamond. And San Diego is a similar size, but a much higher income bracket. So you're looking at the ones that Bally's didn't look at as worth keeping for most of them. And that also speaks to what is available in the size of the markets and just how much income there is. So I know I'm going to get called a shill and apologist. It's also funny because we had someone in the comments saying that, we were complaining about money in the last show. And I'm like, well, what? How can we do both? But I think it's worth pointing out that all those other teams that do not have stability in terms of their TV contract, who are working with MLB, have basically sat out so far this postseason. And Cleveland has committed $27 million. So I think that's not nothing. We'll have to see if there's more coming, but I think that is interesting. And then the other thing I want to talk about is, I'm not sure where it started, but I saw this whole thing pop up about, Carlos Santana being able to help John Canzito well. And it's a great idea in theory. And Carlos Santana is a great teammate. But remember his really good friend in Seattle, Ken Rosenthal, mentioned Julio Rodriguez by name. Julio Rodriguez has some of the worst chase data in baseball in the past. He is if you want the most successful player with a bad chase one, it is Julio Rodriguez. And this is someone he is friends with, talks with in the out seasons and the off season. His 6 percentile, 37% chase rate. He couldn't help his friend, who's also one of the most gifted hitters in baseball. I wish it was true. I wish this is something you could adapt and do, but it doesn't work that way. Swing changes don't happen. Guys don't make massive improvements. We brought this up multiple times on the show, but it really, it caught steam on Twitter, and I just had to be like, I love it in theory, but like I said, if Carlos Santana as a teammate could help a player improve swing rates, Julio Rodriguez would be better at it. Unfortunately, guys who typically chase throughout. We see minor to incremental improvements for most players. It is hard to change a swing. So this caught fire, but I just want to be like, I wish I was wrong, and I would gladly be wrong, but it's something that people ran with, and it's kind of one of those stories where it's like, well, you can find very easy examples of when he was here before and players didn't improve, or when he's been in other spots, or when guys go anywhere with his profile. It's just, unfortunately, swing decisions are swing decisions, and they just don't improve. It's one of those data points that we have seen enough through the years that it's be consistent that, if you are someone who is a guy who chases, you are always going to be a guy who chases. And that's why, I talked to a few people relating to Jack Caglione during the draft who were like, I wouldn't take him in the top 10. And I thought that would go really for all of his ceiling. They're like, yeah, I think his chase rate is eventually going to haunt him. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. I want Noel to work, and I think this team's actually going to give Noel. I mean, he's a lot of fun. Like, who doesn't love the idea of Big Christmas? He's like one of my daughter's favorite players just because his name's Big Christmas and she's 7. And this team needs power. They do. And I think they will give him an opportunity. Just like they gave Oscar Gonzalez, who's a very similar player, but didn't have the loft in his swing to take advantage of that type of natural power he had. Noel's got a better swing geared for his power. They gave Gonzalez a really, good opportunity. I think Noel is going to be the one who benefits in the outfield this year. That is kind of my theory. We'll have to wait and see. But, I saw this catch fire. I thought it should just be addressed. It just doesn't work that way as much as I wish it did. And I don't know where it started. But, he's not going to help improve anyone because, if that was the case, guys like him would be hired, brought back all the time and we'd pay more if it was as simple as that. So let's talk about the JUCO ruling. I saw ESPN roll out a piece and talk about how it's going to make this huge impact. The impact it's going to make is 0. And why is this impact non-existent? Because baseball, amongst all sports, is the most focused on age. Now, you can also, you go and you look at models. I love to read John Hollinger on, The Athletic, and a lot of his models for the draft. And I know Kevin Pelton's at ESPN do factor in age. Like, that is a big part of a lot of what's going on. We talked about when you are young for your level and a young player and you're performing well, it doesn't mean you're going to be a star, but it is one of the best indicators. Like, every great player typically was one of the youngest players at their level. Well, not every, but a large percentage of the young players, great young players in the game, they excel at every step up the ladder. So it might be more correlation than causation is what we're seeing through the time. But we also know that, like, great numbers by older players don't translate as well. They often run into issues even in the lower minors quicker. And so, for those who don't know, I apologize now. Basically, this court case, and I don't know the specifics, but they said that, hey, your JUCO years don't count for your years of eligibility. So you go and play like 2-3 years of JUCO, you can then go play 4 years in the NCAA. And where I think this will have a bigger effect is college baseball. And I think you'll see teams basically form relationships with JUCOs and turn JUCOs into minor leagues. That you'll have a guy go and play there for a few years, build up on skills, and then get a chance to play for a college team. And maybe they get, NIL money or things like that. But, if you were a good JUCO player, and it might make JUCO a little more interesting. There are players who always go to the JUCO ranks. Because if you go to the JUCO ranks, you can be drafted the next year. Like, LaVon Washington is someone that comes to mind. You may not remember him, second round pick. They paid a lot of money in the Lindor class. Honestly, I could be wrong though. And Wash time was the Tampa first or second round, didn't sign, went to JUCO, and then got drafted out of there. I think it was no, not Max Kepler. He's an outfielder. Kep something. I'm blanking on. Was a player I really liked who tried that approach. I think it's Zach Shannon, who was an Ohio kid, who was supposed to go to Ohio State and ended up bouncing around like multiple JUCOs. A lot of kids go there because they want to play pro baseball, and they want to. If you go to college, you have to, wait till you're 21 or 3 years. If you go to the JUCO ranks, you can get drafted immediately. But if you're a really good JUCO player, I think you'll just get drafted and go to the big leagues. Like, it doesn't necessarily give you more, because the way the draft is set up, teams can offer you so much, and they're going to offer you so much. It gives you a little bit more in terms of your negotiating position. But I think it's more going to be, you're going to see older people playing, and older being kids in their 20s. But I think it's going to allow, JUCO teams to become de facto minor leagues for some college programs who probably have some relationships built up that make those easier to get players up. And they get some more seasoning, some more time, and then they can come and play for you at a high level at your program. It's going to allow people to maybe get master's degrees and things like that. Maybe we can look on the positive sides. Like, kid could do his 2 years at a JUCO. Like I said, I got to look at the specifics and see like how many years it is. I kind of, gleamed over the ESPN article. Kylie's a very smart dude who knows what he's talking about. But baseball models are so age-based, incredibly age-based, that I don't think this really affects the Major League Baseball draft. I don't. It gives a little more leverage, but I think if you like a guy enough, you're like, it was always going to be a hard negotiating point. I don't think it changes things too much. I do think it's going to be a shift in college baseball in general, and it might mean that, it's harder for a young player to come in and get a spot because there's guys with lots of years left of ability to play. So it might push a few players more to the JUCO ranks when they're young, or it might push them more to considering the draft. But I don't think it's going to be a big land and sea change like it might be in terms of NFL, just because baseball is the most age-based sport. We're going to come back, talk a little bit about, there were a few minor moves since we are last on the show. One of them being someone that Justin and I really liked, and we're going to kind of, maybe go out and mention a trade idea or two, because I think one thing we all agree on top of, mentioning this one news point, is Cleveland needs to add an outfielder. So we'll get into that in a moment on today's episode of Locked On Guardians. I feel like I'm cheating here. I've got game time. This is Justin's ad read. He forcibly takes this ad read from me every single time. He is such a fan of game time that I never get a chance to talk about game time. And I have used game time, but again, this is what Justin loves. He uses them for everything. And one of the nice things, one of the reasons I like it, is I always get so annoyed when I go to buy tickets and it's like I get to the end, billion service charges, and all of a sudden, $25 is $125. Click all in with game time. You can see what it is before you put it in your cart. Before you get along, you can see what the all-in price is the whole time. They're not trying to pull the rug out from you after you've already I guess I'll just do it because I really want to go. They're just honest and upfront, and they want to sell you your tickets, but they also want to keep you. They want you to keep coming back. They don't want you to feel like you got tricked at the end. You're never going to go back to them. So you can save so many different ways. There's a game time guarantee. There's just so many fantastic things. Like I said, this is Justin's number one way to get tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. So we'll get to some trade talk. I just want to talk very quickly about a few moves around baseball. I know a lot of people were asking about Sean Manaea. He resigned with the Mets. Guardians, I understood the logic of some people hey, they trade for a draft pick. Maybe they'll sign someone who is a competitive balance guy. I don't think they are. I think the competitive balance pick is pretty much a guarantee they're not going after said player. I think that is too big of a risk to take. I do, if you're trading for a pitcher, Eric Fetty is sitting right there. And the problem, if you're the Cardinals, is his value goes slightly down once the season begins because it's not a full season. And pitching is weird. Like the Reds gave Nick Martinez the qualifying offer. He accepted it, so maybe they shouldn't have. But if you're a team, if Fetty pitches like he pitched last year, you might give him the qualifying offer. And at his age, he might accept it. And $21 million. Alex Cobb got $16 million, right? Like I'm contractually obligated to mention that at least twice a week. With him getting that much, like 22 million next year is not that much comparatively. If he pitches like he pitched last year, which is, one of the top 20 pitchers in the American League, he was that good. So he's still out there. But, going back to the original point, Manaea got paid. That is one more player off the market pitching wise. I thought it was very, very interesting. Patrick Sandoval got 2 years, $18 million. And what's fascinating about this is, what are the Angels doing? Like, I still would love to call the Angels to get Taylor Ward out of there. That'll be a trade talk for another day. I'm not going to do that without Justin. But they didn't want to pay him $6 million to not pitch this year. But because he wasn't going to pitch, he was going to cost about $6 million next year as well. So it would have been 2 years, $12 million. He hit the open market, and Boston gave him 2 years, basically $19 million, I want to say. That's right. So open market was 2 years, 19, and Boston, and the other, and if you pay for him this year, yeah, you're pretty much pocketed because he's hurt to next year. But they could have let him go at 1 year, 6, and it would have been no more probably than like 212. And the Angels, who are paying all these other players, decided not to keep a young pitcher and pay him while he was hurt, and he got significantly more on the open market. The Angels are weird. It's a nice pickup for Boston. It's something they can keep in their back pocket for a year. Sandoval was really solid before the injury. I would have loved to have seen Cleveland go out and do a deal like that, but I also understand why they wouldn't. That's more than Brandon Woodruff, who's a better pitcher, got after his injury. But his was later in the year. Like, there's a chance Sandoval could help Boston this year. But yeah, it's just fascinating to watch that unfold and just Anaheim continue to hurt themselves. What a weird organization. So I promised some trade talk. I was kind of rolling through the National League, just kind of looking at things, trying to figure out what makes a whole lot of sense. I kind of stopped at the Nationals because they made trades. I don't think they're going to trade CJ Abrams. I don't know if Cleveland would want him after the whole, gambling issue. For those who don't know, he was out at like 8 a.m. an all-nighter at a casino before a 1 o'clock game. Not ideal. He's not a shortstop, and he had a terrible second half. But I know Cleveland. If Cleveland traded Jose Ramirez to San Diego, Abrams would have been in that deal coming to Cleveland. I think if you can convince him to be a center fielder, there's a ton of surplus value yet in Abrams. Cleveland loves to trade with San Diego. Go check out San Diego's roster resource page. It's bleak. Talk about them having all their contract and salary issues. That is a bleak team right now. Like, yes, one can make the comment that so is Cleveland's. And there's the guys like, Jackson Merrill is fantastic. And there's Manny Machado and Fernando Tatis and Luis Arez. Man, but the rest of it, man, I don't know how many of those guys I trust. It's going to be an interesting year for the Padres, but I don't see a trade that made a whole lot of sense there. When you're kind of bouncing around, it's like St. Louis. I would love Brendan Donovan. I know, we got multiple Cardinals fans watching now. Team Biv, I'm sorry, my brain's gone from the weekend, I think is the one name. I don't think they'll trade Donovan. I think he's too valuable. Nolan Gorman can't play second. I know we've talked about, Cleveland's ability to, maybe that they're probably going to run Brito out there. I don't think Gorman's a fit with his K rate issue a year ago. I don't know if there's an ideal fit, but St. Louis is interesting from that example of like, they seem to have more guys in spots still. So I'd be curious to see what they're going to trade. There's been all sorts of talking points with Cincinnati. Cincinnati is, again, just a team that there is so much up in the air and unproven. Eventually, we'll settle down and actually talk about these teams, but I don't see too much there. Seiya Suzuki does not want a DH. I would still be curious to see, though he is absolutely terrible in the outfield. So I don't know what you do with that. And then, the name I kept coming around to, if I'm going to do a solo show and do something where it is, Justin's not going to be upset with me for taking a whole franchise away from him and his ability to talk about, is Miami. That team has traded away almost everything that is not nailed down. There is some pitching left in Miami, but one of the other things I often talk about is this idea that if you're a team, you should always look to improve on the margins. Like, if you can make your team better, make your team better. And one of the ways you can make the Guardians better is if they are going to consider a Noel Brennan platoon. I'm kind of done. It sounds bad to say it this way. I don't have a lot of faith in Will Brennan at this point. I think you can upgrade on the fringes with Jesus Sanchez. Last 2 years, he's had a WRC plus of 100 and 107, playing a lot of games. And I say this because the dude can't hit lefties at all. He's a platoon bat. He's playing way too much against lefties, and he's really, really, really bad against them. So if you do set up that platoon that we talked about with Noel and Sanchez can play both outfield spots. He's actually better in right. His metrics are pretty good out there. It'd probably be, Brennan, I know he had the goof in the postseason, but a year ago, his metrics were fantastic. But Sanchez would be better than Noel. He'd probably be better than Thomas in right field. And this team, he was like, I want to say a 110 for his career against righties. This team needs more left-handed bats in general. He's also got some pop. Now, he talked about K rates with Gorman. His are in the 20s. They're a little more acceptable, but he does chase. It's not great. He's in that, he's in kind of a Noelian, and he's 36%. Noel was pushing 40, but this is how the profile can occasionally work. We talked about, there's a certain kind of level player. His bat speed's 90th percentile. His hard hit is 95th percentile. His average exit velocity, 93rd. He's got some juice. You just want to put him in a strict platoon. And if you put him with Noel in that platoon, with the power between both of them, you might actually get close to 30 home runs. Might be a crazy statement, but he hit 20 last year in, how many games was it? In 149 games. I'm sorry, he hit 18. Limit what he's facing. He had 100 WRC plus a year ago. He carries higher bat pips, so I'm not as worried about that. He's an okay defender. Like I say, he's not a star. That's above average, likes him better than Van Graff's defensive value, but he can, he's played center field in a pinch. I don't think he would cost a ton. He's a player he's going to make 2.1 million this year. You get him for 25, 20. You get him for 3 years, though. You'd have 3 years of team control, which they like. You can trade prospects and you can trade far away prospects. I know I'm not talking about the Jesus Luzardo trade. I still would rather go for Weathers than Luzardo. I just think Luzardo's had more inconsistencies. I mean, Weathers has had a ton of inconsistencies, but and then Weathers missed time with health. So I think it's just because I think Weathers is going to be cheaper to acquire than Luzardo. Luzardo netted one really good prospect and then one flyer. And I would love a world to trade and get Weathers and Sanchez, and just trade. And the players they traded were high ceiling but far away, and that's been what they have gone for with all of their trades. So it is someone like Welbin Francisco, who we've talked about on the show, who's top 15, some people top 10 prospect in system, who is kind of their young, I don't want to say star player, but is kind of like the star of their lower minors, of not the lower minors, I should say, but more of the, the fall league stuff, kind of the developmental league. Robert Arias is really interesting. Another kind of far away player. You're looking at, neither of those is probably for Sanchez. It's probably someone else, but you can trade some of those farther away pieces and improve yourself on the fringes. And I always think that's valuable. I think having that churn and finding ways to make yourself better, because I wish Will Brennan worked. He hasn't. And this is a player the last 2 years who has been at least league average. And what did I say when they traded for Lane Thomas? This organization has struggled to get to league average when it comes to outfield production. It has been a huge struggle. Luke Scott is still the most successful outfielder this team has drafted and developed since Manny Ramirez. Oh, well, I guess Steve Kwan is getting close to passing him in WAR, but that's where we are. Luke Scott is Ryan Church. These are the guys who are at the top of that list. It's not been a very productive position for this organization. They spent a lot of first round picks relatively recently on outfielders, Zimmer and Pappy and the like. So you're kind of hoping to maybe get someone who can get you close to that average. And again, just put him in a strict platoon. Him and Noel, I would guarantee 25 home runs with those two playing right field every day. Put him in there, let him play every day. It's not going to always be pretty, but I would guarantee as a combination, they would hit at least 25, maybe get you close to 30. I think there is that much power potential between them as a combo to get you there. And then occasionally Noel can, play against, the right players, and you find ways to make it work and balance it out. And if Chase DeLauder kicks the door down and, is playing so well, you have to give him everyday playing time in that position, then great. These are not guys who would block a star if a star is on the way. But what they can do in the intermediate is help give you consistent power, which they need. And again, let's get closer to average. Let's make that position, a net positive instead of a net negative. Tell me what you think below. Thank you all for joining me on my very special ADD edition. That's the problem with solo shows. You can see my ADD in full force on these. Before we go, I do want to send out thank yous to Naderade 28, P0W, David America, King of Spades, who all did all did iTunes reviews this month over on Apple iTunes. So thank you to all of you gentlemen for those reviews. We always like to give the shout outs and the thank yous for the iTunes reviews. We appreciate it. So yeah, thank you for doing that. And thank you all for joining me. I hope, like I said, no matter what you do, I hope you've had a great week. Take care of yourself. It's a time of year where it's very important to do that. There's a lot going on. A lot can drag you down. Take care of yourself. Take some time for you. But thank you all for joining me. Again, do the whole rate and review, download daily, hit that thumbs up, do all the little things that you can do for free to help us continue to grow. We very much appreciate all the support throughout the course of this year. It has been an amazing year for us. And yeah, my Josh Naylor live stream, who would have expected during the middle of an Ohio State playoff game, that we would have the most successful live stream that wasn't multi-hours. So thank you all again. It's been a mind-blowing great year. All of you are fantastic. Thank you. And go Guardians, go.